Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. Again, Christine Rodriguez here with the PEO, Manpower Logistics and Business Solutions for the Navy. I have the last panel up here, and these are 2 of our 7 portfolios here. And if you heard my opening remarks, I talked about MLB and our direct support with readiness for the sailor and the Marines as well. So I have 2 of the PMs up here. Dave Kemp is our program manager for Ready Relevant Learning, and Colonel Beck is our program manager for the Marine Corps Manpower IT Systems Modernization. So I will now hand it over to Mr. Kemp. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone, and thanks for taking time here at the end of the day. Know we are the last session between you and happy hour, and so we take that responsibility seriously here. So it really is an honor to be here, and I've got one of the best jobs in the Navy, right? After a career as a naval officer, the second chapter here, I get to focus on enlisted sailors and ensuring that our enlisted sailors have the world-class technical training. So really need to be able to make a direct link to individual and unit readiness every single day. So pleased to be here with my partner in crime, Colonel Beck. So thanks for being here. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you very much. Mr. Schwartz, a great supporter from Fleet Forces Command, so thank you so much for being here, sir. And then, although she's not here, Ms. Jane Rathman has just been an amazing supporter of the RL program, and we really appreciate it. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what RRL is and where we're going, but up front, we're at a really neat point in the program. We're close to being done on the initial development of our career-long learning continuums. We're deep into modernizing our accession pathways. If you think A schools and C schools, general skills training, and then specialized technical training with the end in sight. And now we're pivoting to address performance support and getting that performance support to sailors at point of need. And so a really neat point in the program, and most importantly, we're solving real challenges, right? Things like decades-old training requirements review chits, right? When we review a course, we identify what's wrong with the course. We've never had the ability to really be able to address that. And so this year, for the first time, we're addressing 50 of those training requirements review chits, some of which have been sitting on the shelf for over a decade. We're addressing facilities issues. We're changing the culture of how we do training in the Navy, and we're addressing sustainment. And that's really one of the original sins that led to Ready Relevant Learning, was that we weren't addressing the training that we were putting in the schoolhouses. And so as a result, sailors were getting training on equipment that no longer existed in the fleet, and they weren't getting any training on the gear that they use every day shipboard or planeside or on their submarines. And so we're really addressing that sustainment piece of it. But most importantly, to circle back, we are enabling our type commanders who own the training requirement for the first time based on the results of the career-long learning continuum process to make data-informed risk decisions on where they invest their their very precious individual training dollars. So again, a really neat point in the program. So this is the portfolio overview of PEO MLB. I'm not going to go over this, but the reason that I wanted to put this up was that I really believe in the strength of the PEO MLB model. If you think about, or if you were here for the last session with Log IT, he talked about the linkage between logistics and financial transactions. If you think about training, most training in the Navy for our sailors is derived from maintenance or operational procedures, right, to train our sailors. That comes from the Log IT portfolio. And so I think we've got these linkages between logistics, training, HR, and finances. It really made sense to put all of that in PEO MLB and make sure that we had a team that was working together here. For Ready Relevant Learning itself, our portfolio management office, we're a little bit different than some of the other portfolios, right? A lot of them are developing IT applications, developing IT systems. We're not, quote unquote, bending metal ourselves, right? The role that we were tasked to play is as the lead system integrator for training in the Navy. And if you think about how the other services operate, Army's got a 4-star TRADOC that pulls together training for the entire Army. Air Force has got a 4-star ATC. Marine Corps has got a 3-star TCOM. Navy has a 2-star naval education and training commander, and he doesn't own training for the entire Navy, right? We're very tribal in the Navy, and so putting in place an executive agent in the form of Fleet Forces Command with Admiral Caudle and the tie-in to the acquisition community with PEO-MLB performing that integration function to bridge between all of the different silos has really turned out to be a very powerful model. And as part of that, one of the things that we've been very focused on is forging strong partnerships across the Navy. We have a strong partnership with every single learning center, all 17 type commanders, all of the resource sponsors, and most importantly, all of what we call training system program offices. And I specifically wanted to highlight the training system program offices, right? These are the folks who are really building most of the training in the Navy. The examples here, just so you know who they are, is, for example, PEO UWS-TR, so Underwater Systems TR. That's the central point of training for the submarine force, non-nuclear training outside of naval reactors. PMA 205 in aviation, PMS 339 in NAVC, NAVFAC Training Support Agency for all of our expeditionary commands. And NAVWAR 4.4 for the Information Warfare Enterprise. And so getting all of these folks together in the room, making sure we're all talking to each other is really the role that we play as the lead system integrator to make sure that the left hand and the right hand know what's doing and that we're not doing things like investing in 2 courses for the same thing in 2 different enterprises when we can make those efficiencies. So this next slide is really what is Ready Relevant Learning. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but I would like to hone in on just a couple of words. You know, up top, you see it says RL is the Navy's long-term investment in improving individual sailor performance and enhancing fleet readiness. I want to really focus in on long-term investment, right? A lot of the work that we've done over the past couple of years has been to develop essentially what is a multi-FTAP plan on how we're getting after the training gaps that we've identified in the Navy. This is not a flash in the pan, right? Ready Relevant Learning is here to stay. What you might see is that Ready Relevant Learning, if we continue to get this right and make improvements, that RL is how the Navy does training. It becomes how the Navy does training, right? So not a flash in the pan, a long-term investment. The second word that I want to highlight is in the second paragraph on the left, using a single portfolio manager construct. I think that this is really important, and this is something that's different than you see really in a lot of other places. I'm gonna highlight a report that Senator Roger Wicker, who is currently the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, he put out a report titled Restoring Freedom's Forge. And what he said in there is that he said we need to enable decisive action in that functional support must be moved directly into upgraded PEOs that can integrate requirements, resources, and acquisition to implement portfolio management while creating more collaborative structures to enable joint coordination. That's what Ready Relevant Learning does for the training community in the Navy, and we're really proud to be able to play that role. To quote Jane Rathman here a couple of days ago, Ms. Rathman, the Don CIO, she said, instead of this process in the Navy where we're passing things, you know, from a functional to a resource sponsor for validation, to funding, then to the acquisition community, this linear process, we all need to be in the car together at the beginning of the process and take this journey together. And again, this is part of what Ready Relevant Learning has been able to achieve. And the final word that I want to highlight on this slide is on the right-hand side under value to the Department of the Navy. If you've been here, if you've listened to some of the different speakers, Admiral Kohler, some of the different flag officers, I think the word that you hear over and over again is accelerate. And that's what Ready Relevant Learning is doing. We are accelerating, we're going faster, we're focused on delivering capability ahead of PIM, and that's what we want to be able to do. Okay, so here, I think the bottom line here is that, as I said before, our goal is to improve individual sailor performance to enhance unit readiness. Just so you know where the RL program stands or is viewed in the Navy, we are a NAV Plan implementation framework objective, so we're part of the CNO's navigation plan, which I think is important. We're a pillar in the Chief of Naval Personnel's strategic design. We're one of U.S. Fleet Forces Command's key issues playbook issues, and so I think what that demonstrates is that you have alignment between all of the different stakeholders on the importance of this effort to get training right for our sailors. One of the questions that I get a lot is, well, aren't you LVC, Live, Virtual, and Constructive for the Navy? What's the difference between Ready, Relevant Learning and LVC? Ready Relevant Learning is very focused on that first phase, the individual sailor training. LVC is focused really on the second and third phases, which is unit level and strike group training, or to use surface warfare terms, the basic, advanced, and integrated and sustainment phases of the training process. And so Ready Relevant Learning, we are the foundation for LVC. LVC is obviously one of the Project 33 initiatives, and Ready Relevant Learning is the foundation for a sailor to be able to then perform as part of a watch team, as part of a unit training exercise. So what you see here are the 3 lines of effort for Ready Relevant Learning, as well as the 3 stages of evolution. We have declared victory on block learning. We're very firmly in the second stage of evolution, which is enhanced accessible learning, and we're working to transition to that third stage, put in place the conditions to be able to transition to that third stage, which is modernized, on-demand, fleet-responsive learning. The first line of effort is the development of career-long learning continuums. This is really, again, for the first time, game changer for the Navy. We looked at every single document in the Navy that tasks a sailor to do something, right? And then we looked at every single course curriculum control document in the Navy. What do we give sailors training to do? And then did the gap analysis, right? And what we found is that at the apprentice level, approximately 45% of what we ask an apprentice sailor to do, the tasks are gapped. At the journeyman level, that rises to about 55%, and at the supervisory level, it's 65%, meaning 65% of the things that we ask a supervisory or a master level sailor in the Navy to do, we don't give them the training to be able to do that, right? And so I'll talk a little bit more about the results of that effort here on the next slide, but again, game changing for us to finally be able to understand where those training gaps are, to be able to type commanders to prioritize where they want to fill those gaps. We also learned a lot through that process. We thought when we started Ready Relevant Learning that we were going to have to go down a pathway of developing high-end AR, VR training shipboard in a DDIL environment, right? In a denied, degraded environment. Once we started to get through this process, understand where the gaps were and what the type commanders wanted us to address, essentially 80% of the gaps are in the form of performance support. That's a completely different, a completely different challenge, right? When we talk about performance support, we're talking about maybe a 3 to 5 minute video on a step of a maintenance process that a sailor always has trouble on. I always use the analogy, think about you're going to change the oil on your car, you go to YouTube and you type, how do I change the oil on a 1972 Pinto, right? And it comes up with a couple of videos for you to be able to watch. That's what performance support is for the Navy, is going to be the development of these performance support videos and performance support tools for sailors to better help them perform their job. The second line of effort is modern delivery at point of need. This really has 2 parts to it. The first is modernizing the courseware that we currently have. This is that accession pathway modernization that I was talking about, the A schools and the C schools. And then the second part of that is putting in place an IT infrastructure that can then get training to sailors when they need it. We really had an industrial age training system before, right? Where we would fly a sailor to somewhere to take training, right? We need to be able to deliver training to sailors when and where they need it, no matter where that is. I'm sure you've heard a lot, for example, about the USS Abraham Lincoln and some of the different pilots that took place on the Abraham Lincoln as part of their C2 effort, Flank Speed Edge afloat, right? One of the pilots that we conducted in Ready Relevant Learning was the ability for sailors to dial back to a shore command using Microsoft Teams and take courses underway. And we had 2 sailors complete a week-long course, 40 hours. They were able to get all of the reference material. They were able to take the tests while the ship was out underway. And again, not something that you could do using the current infrastructure, but using C2 really going to be a game changer for us. And so we were excited to be able to do that. The final line of effort is integrated content development. Again, for me, this really has 2 pieces, right? The first is the tie-in with the acquisition community. If you think about it, when we buy a new black box, right, in the acquisition community, or we update a black box, what is the process to be able to identify every place in the Navy, every course in the Navy where we teach something about that black box, and then make a determination as to whether or not the training then needs to be updated. Right now, that is a years or decades long process, if it happens at all. Curriculum surveillance, essentially, right? And so how do we take that and make that faster so that when we buy that new black box, we get a trigger that we need to update the training in the schoolhouse so that the training does not become out of date. The second piece of integrated content development is really that trigger from the fleet on what do we need, when we need to update something in the schoolhouse, right? The example that I use here is the challenges that the Navy has been facing very successfully in the Red Sea, right? That is driving real-time changes to training in the schoolhouse. And so it's that feedback loop and the ability to do that quickly, be agile, and get that updated training into the schoolhouse. And then I think one of the most important pieces of this slide really is the outcome statements on the right-hand side that really, it's not about activity, it's about outcomes, if you think about this, and those outcome statements are really our North Star that we're driving towards. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about here is, as really one of my final slides, is really what outcomes are happening, since I focused on outcomes, right? I think a lot of folks who think about Ready Relevant Learning are thinking about the content that we're developing. And that's correct, right? The first thing that we tackled was this succession pathway modernization. That pig has been moving through the python, and as I said, the end is in sight. We currently have requirements development complete on 50 of 71 ratings that were in scope, and just as a reminder, there's 87 ratings and apprentice career tracks in the Navy, right? So when we went through this process, it was determined that 71 of those were in scope. There were ones that were determined to be out of scope. So for example, the air traffic controlman, that curriculum is controlled by the FAA, so that's not something that we were going to touch, right? So there's different reasons for why a rating would be out of scope. So for the 71 ratings that were in scope, we've completed requirements development on 50 of those ratings. 33 of them, content conversion is complete, and fielding is complete for 23 of them, meaning we've pushed 23 complete accession pathways into the schoolhouse. And to date, over 16,000 sailors of our Navy's newest sailors have completed this updated accession pathway, this updated modernized accession pathway, and that number is only going to grow. On the career-long learning continuum, there were 80 ratings that were determined to be in scope. We are ahead of schedule there. 70 are complete. We put the remaining 10 on contract ahead of schedule last year, and those will be completed this year. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of what we have identified, overall across the 70 ratings to date, there are 175,000 gapped tasks, which have been grouped into 10,000 courses of action, and 8,400 of those are for performance support. And so again, over 80% of the requirement that demand signal that we're getting from the type commanders is in the form of performance support. And so really a powerful set of data that is really guiding how we move forward. And I think now one of the things that I didn't think that we were going to be addressing, but we ended up, addressing as part of this fielding process, has been diving into facilities, right? So to date, we have updated 157 of Naval Education and Training Command's classrooms, modernized with over 2,300 new workstations for a total of over 300 modernized classrooms and 5,500 new workstations to date, with additional investments in Wi-Fi, mobile capabilities, virtual and augmented reality technologies, and upgraded networks and servers for our classrooms. And so we've really made a significant investment in the quality of the classrooms. When we started this process, literally slide carousels and overhead projectors were being found in our classrooms that we were being used. So a significant advancement in the technology that we're using in our classrooms to teach sailors. We're also diving, though, into areas that we didn't think we were going to have to address, right? HVAC, electrical. We can't put a new electronic classroom into a building that has a leaky roof, right? You'll ruin the new electronic classroom. And so it's really driving us into the facilities realm as well, too, which has been a nagging challenge for Navy for a very long time. But what I really wanted to focus on, in addition to the courseware, the facilities, the electronic classrooms, the career-long learning continuums. I've got a couple of examples here that I just thought were incredibly cool that I wanted to share with you. So on the top left, this is the multi-purpose reconfigurable training system. You can see this down at the NAV War booth. RL has a booth down on the floor in the 100 section, I think 104 if I remember correctly. You can see the example of this. This is something that we've been using in the classrooms, right? Big touch screens with kind of AR, VR, I mean really, really cool stuff. For the first time, we did a test and we put that on the USS Abraham Lincoln. Never been deployed afloat before, right? And so the example that I use here, you think about maybe a kid up on the flight deck messes something up, his chief petty officer, I mean, it's dangerous up there, right? So the chief petty officer sends him down to the ship's training classroom and says, you need to go through a couple of scenarios on MERT, refresh your skills. When you pass those scenarios, then you can come up and I'll test you out to put you on the flight deck. So first time done through the RL program, very happy about that. In the top right, you can see a couple of examples where we have used additive manufacturing to address some of the training device challenges that we had. On the left-hand side, this is a 3D printed torpedo tube at the Submarine Learning Center in Groton, Connecticut. And on the right-hand side is a 3D printed medium tactical vehicle replacement transfer case at the Center for Seabees and Facilities Engineering. Really hard, expensive to try and get a new torpedo tube in a classroom, and if you pull it off a decommissioned vessel, then it's probably not up to date, right? And so by using 3D printing, we were able to get a modern torpedo tube into a classroom for the students to be able to get their hands on. The motor vehicle medium tactical vehicle replacement transfer case, to me was amazing, right? I mean, I grew up holding a flashlight over my dad's shoulder as he was working on the car, hand me that tool, right? And that's how I learned how to work on a car. Kids don't do that anymore, right? And so they have no idea how things operate underneath, for example, the hood of a vehicle. They're a lot less mechanical than they used to be. And so we took a transfer case, blew it up to about a 6 foot tall. We put plexiglass on the sides. We color-coded all of the gears inside. It runs on compressed air and electricity, so it actually turns, and so that the students can see how the mechanics of the transfer case works inside. It's an amazingly effective training device. And again, 3D printed, we were very thrilled to be able to do that. And that was NAVFAC that came up with that idea, and we were thrilled to be able to support them. On the bottom left, again, something out of NAVFAC. This is a Ford Power Stroke diesel engine, an actual Ford Power Stroke diesel engine. Matter of fact, I know it's hard to see there, but if you were to look underneath the panel, the key fob is actually suspended with a piece of cable so we don't lose it. This is hooked up on an engine rack on wheels so that the students, we can actually start the engine, it runs, right? The instructors can insert faults into the engine, and then the students have to troubleshoot and then fix the engine, right? Pretty cool, and I think one of the best things about that is the building that it's actually contained in. The schoolhouse out at Port Hueneme is called the Diesel Coliseum, which I think is the coolest name for a schoolhouse ever. So again, a neat example of something that we've been able to do. On the bottom right, and I kind of saved this one for last, one of the bad things about AFCEA, right? One of the bad things about conferences like ITSEC is all of the flag officers and the SESs walk around and they get really liquored up on AR and VR technology, and it becomes a more cowbell thing, right? I want more cowbell. Not always the right answer for every training solution, but in the bottom right, this is a great example of where AR and VR is useful. This is, we put in place at the Center for Naval Aviation Training in Pensacola, Florida, 16 VR lanes to teach our plane captains how to direct the planes on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. Probably one of the most dangerous jobs in the Navy, right? The way that we used to do this training was we would have 40 students in a classroom. They would be standing up behind the chairs in the classroom. We'd have one instructor up front. They'd be doing the signals, and the instructor would, try to figure out if what they were doing was correct, right? And then if the weather was nice, we had the outline of an aircraft carrier painted in the parking lot behind the building. We would take a wheeled stool or a wheeled chair. We would pretend that would be a plane, and then the student would give directions, and the instructor would push the chair around based on kind of how the student did. Obviously not optimal, right? Here we have these VR scenarios with the goggles and the wands. The aircraft in the scenario responds to the student's direction. We can do day scenarios, night scenarios. The horizon changes, right? So they got to get used to that disorientation on the flight deck, the sound. It's amazingly realistic training, and is leading to better outcomes for our plane captains on aircraft carriers. So just a couple of examples of how we are moving fast to get world-class training into the hands of sailors at the point of need. And again, as I mentioned, over 16,000 of our newest sailors have gone through that training, and that number is only going to increase. So this is my last slide. These are our goals for fiscal year 25. I want to highlight that last one, number 6, right? Establish a basic capability to deliver performance support at afloat points of need. This is the major contract effort that we have ongoing right now. It's being conducted through NOC TSD, Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division in Orlando, Florida. The sources saw notice went out in December. They were conducting 1v1s this month with interested parties, and we should have the RFP out here within a month or two, right? And this is to put in place what we're calling a performance support video factory, to be able to produce what we anticipate are going to be thousands of performance support videos to be able to deliver to our sailors. And so I encourage you to check that out if that's something that you're interested in. We're really excited about that effort, and that's really the next big contracting effort for us that I want to make sure you're aware of. I'm going to end with a quote from Admiral Caudle that Mr. Schwartz delivered earlier this week. Ready relevant learning is how we will forge an elite warfighting force by maturing sailors over a career development continuum that can assess, innovate, and execute both technically and tactically. We will win with sailors who can master and engage their weapon systems with speed, effect, and absolute lethality across the full spectrum of modern warfare. Admiral Caudle is the commander of Fleet Forces Command, and we really appreciate his support and his leadership and his advocacy for Ready Relevant Learning. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm going to introduce Colonel Beck from our MITSM program, and then after he delivers his remarks, we'll take questions at the end. Thank you. Colonel Beck.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks, Mr. Rodriguez, for the intro as well. And thanks to all of our industry partners that are out here, right, spending the time, as Dave said, when we know we've got looming happy hour and other events that are social going on here. So appreciate everybody sticking around and hearing our comments here. I want to give a brief introduction of myself. My first half of my Marine Corps career was spent as a EA-6B Prowler, ECMO, Electronic Countermeasures Officer. And this second half of my career has been shifted over to acquisition officer. So I've had the great fortune over the last couple weeks, well, 2.5, 3 weeks here, of turning over with somebody I consider a friend and a great mentor over that time in the acquisition community, Colonel Rob Bailey. And it's becoming very obvious as we've made the rounds here just how well embedded he's become in this industry. And kind of it's a testament to his personality and what he's done with the program so far. So thank you for that. And so I'm Colonel Matt Beck. As I said, I'm newly designated PM for the Manpower IT Systems Modernization portfolio. And we'll talk about a little bit about what that is. So this slide is kind of giving you what the overview of what's guiding us, right? So, you know, first, what is MITSM and what's kind of our mission statement, right? So this all started with the idea that we've got a lot of siloed IT systems that are driving our manpower management, right? And it's really just that. It's manpower management focus. It needs to shift, and it hadn't shifted to talent management, right? So how do we tap into, optimize where we're putting the talent that resides in so many of our Marines that are out there? And again, how do we have the tools that help us to optimize that and drive it forward? So that's kind of what drove our mission statement there of what we're doing. And when you look at what the problem set is, right, I don't think anything on that list in the lower left-hand quadrant there is surprising to anybody here as to these are the type of attributes that make systems and applications modern, right? It's what technologies are out there available today, and in many ways it's what most of our systems and applications were lacking. So it's why we needed to focus and look at handling this problem. The program was stood up late 23, officially as a program office. And just remember that date because that's going to be, that's relevant on one of the later slides when I start to talk about where we've been, where we're going, and some of the constraints that we had revolving when we stood this up. We look at our focus areas. Really where we're starting to crack down on this is the full life cycle from recruiting, retention, and then assignments process, both on the officer and the enlisted side. So a holistic look at, again, how we're moving our talent around in the Marine Corps. And to a certain extent, we had to really make sure that we were maintaining a speed of focus on this, right? So, you know, the situation isn't getting any worse or isn't getting any better. And so we definitely need to continue moving with that speed of focus. When we look at our end state, what is it that we really want? Well, we want modernized systems that are across the board talking to each other and coming up with those optimal solutions for, again, moving that talent throughout the Corps. The middle section kind of tells you, you know, this is sort of a process map for how we've decided to go after this problem. And it all starts with, again, defining the problems, rethinking how we're looking at our current processes and applications, and how we might reimagine them to be optimized given current technologies. And then we go into a second phase, which is really go ahead and start developing those prototypes, right? Again, speed. So we're taking small chunks, and we want to do speedy deliveries of prototypes, see how they play out, and further inform our follow-on actions. And then the ones that go to the top are going to be the delivered capabilities, the min viable products and our min viable capability releases as they develop. And then the loop starts back over again. That'll continue to inform the next hack of work, the next iteration of work that we're going to do, and how we move it forward. All right, this slide is going to tell you, this is showing what is it that we're measuring, really. What's important to us and what are our objectives. And again, I don't think anything on here is surprising to the industry sector here for these type of tool sets and what it is that we want. But ultimately, we're looking, again, to integrate, we want to integrate data across by using APIs and reduce those life cycle costs in the long run. So we've got a lot of existing systems, right? We need to be able to tap into those and phase these transitions over time. We want all the current tech, right? Current capabilities that are out there through AI, ML, and any sort of automated processes that we can bring to accelerate that decision-making process and, again, bring it into a modern time and optimize it ultimately. You know, so many of our systems, we have things that are being, you know, hand-jammed, that are being walked across systems, and for obvious reasons, those are suboptimal. So that kind of hits some of the next points too, increasing that automation across all these tool sets as well, and then still maintaining that focus on the user interface and the user experience, right? So that's a huge guiding principle that we'll have that I'll talk to on another slide as well, but that's always paramount in how we're reimagining these processes, right? Because again, we want to make sure that we have that full transparency, agency, and information getting to our Marines. And then again, we want to leverage anything else that we're seeing our other partners do, right, across the DoD and across the Don. And when we can leverage those to, you know, reach economies ourselves or reach contracting speed of action on any vehicles that we can get to that technology sooner. And the bottom bullet there, continuous, right? So we're going to continuously integrate this and learn from it as we go through these cycles and these small chunks. All right, so this was probably one of the most frenetic slides I've ever gotten, but it's a great insight into the mind of Rob Bailey as he told me, right? So this was a great turnover for me to kind of chew on and think about. But really what this slide is showing is what's our acquisition approach, you know, from the top level down. And if you look at the upper left there, right? So it all starts with, you know, taking a full canvas of all the apps and systems that we have, right? And it needs to be prioritized by the functional owners of all those processes. And we also got to look at what do we think is going to be the ROI on those. So tell us what your priorities are and let us try to think through what's going to be the return on investment when we start to modernize that. Then we got to put them through this filter, right? We got to look through a filter of affordability, how quickly we can get to these systems, and then ultimately what the complexity and the capacity of our team is to handle them. So that's your little filter that then we come down and we've now prioritized the list and we have our body of work that's going to be ahead of us. Then we're going to go through that modernization process, right? So when you go look down to the lower left there, you're going to see that basically that process reimagination, right? We got to look at the ones that we're deciding to tackle. How are we going to rework them and reimagine them? As you can imagine, the Marine Corps is really good at a lot of things, right? But we like to do things the same way, right? Once we have a method, we like to do that pretty much the same way all the time. So that reimagination is challenging across all of our functionals and our partners. But there are advocates that are out there, and it's gaining traction as we are delivering product and they get to see that return on investment. So that gains us a lot. In sort of the middle bottom there, you can see the continuous loop that we're going through as we're developing, cranking out, seeing what we learn from it, and then ultimately into the upper right, putting it into our integrated data sets, right? So how are we bringing this together across the enterprise, right? And what's going to be our management technique for that? On the lower right there, you can see kind of what again, our guiding principles as some of what we talked about. We're going to choose the right acquisition pathways that we can, right? That give us that speed and are appropriate for the work that we're trying to set off on doing with each individual tool or application. And really, we want to make sure that we're kind of hitting those small bets and then looking at how we can scale that across, right? So again, like we're breaking it down into chunks, and we want to see sort of an end-to-end of that process, and then we'll scale it across. So that's kind of, I think, in a lot of the conversations we've had across here, we're not looking at trying to go all at once, and quite frankly, we don't have the funding right now to go across all at once. So that's going to be one of our key strategies for pushing forward. This kind of shows you both where we've been and where we're going. So as I said, in 23 was when late 23 was when the program office officially stood up. And so what did that do for us from a budget cycle perspective and when we made our POM request, right? So we didn't really get a fully vetted, well thought, well-informed POM request until POM 27. So that left us with a couple, what we'll call inner years here between then and now, right? And that's limited what we can do, but we continue to work through that and find our small wins. So as we closed out in 24, as it closed out, what we had was a series of our OTAs that were awarded that focused on the prototypes that we wanted to produce and implement in 25. So those are all ongoing, and then we look for them to complete in 25 with our MVPs that'll come out of that. Those will inform what we're going to go after in 26 and beyond, and how we'll structure those contracts and those vehicles for the follow-on years. And finally, as we move into those out years, we're going to tackle that. How do we converge all this, right? So how do we do all of these individual efforts, converge it across so that we truly have an enterprise look at the Manpower modernization? So this lists some of our challenges and our opportunities. I've already kind of hit on the funding piece of it. So it's critical that in 26 and 27 that funding comes in and we're able to maintain the momentum that we've developed in these first couple years. Again, as we've gotten successes out of some of our prototyping, and leadership is starting to see that ROI, then we're getting that advocacy as well, and that's gaining momentum. So that should carry us well into 27. It's really difficult with a lot of these systems to maintain both the legacy system, right? So to sustain that, especially in a budget-constrained environment, as well as at the same time be developing the follow-on systems that we want to replace it. And then there's also a piece that we got to work through, and this is something where I think industry can be very helpful for us as well. When we look at other ways that we've transitioned off of legacy systems, how can we sort of bite-size that and/or avoid doing it all at once if we can? Again, to maintain that speed of effort that we want. We've already hit on the time to deploy and the velocity being such a key objective for us, and how we can keep moving that forward into our future investments. The other thing, as I talked about, right, we like Marine Corps likes its processes. We like the way we do things, and so introducing a new way of doing these bite-sized, agile type development of getting these modernized capabilities in has been challenging with some of the other stakeholders that are in the group. But we're dragging them along. In some cases, we've got advocates and others, and the work continues. All right, so 25, 26, opportunities and areas of interest for all of our industry partners here. Looking at that data environment development, right? So as we start to understand how all of these applications and tool sets are going to converge and how we want them to converge, we're going to need, of course, the appropriate data environments to handle that. And really drive towards that optimized solution, right? Of how do we use AI, ML type technologies to come up with optimized solutions? It's all going to be data driven, and it has to be able to access those data environments seamlessly. We'll continue to look at all of those use cases of those technologies, right? Where do they fit? Where do they not fit? And where can they be of the most ROI to our enterprise? We're going to be looking for cross-domain solutions as well, right? We know we're not going to be able to put everything singular, so we've got to keep developing those cross-domain solutions that are going to enable this sort of cross-talking between the tool sets. And then, in 26, probably late this year and into 26, we're going to be looking to put out a lot of RFIs to really gather some information for forming how our multi-award, IDIQ type contract will carry through in 27 when we get the budget that we want. And it'll be ready and poised to do whatever the budget will allow us to do based on the success of that funding, right? So we put that in place using, again, that information that we get from our industry partners. And then we're also looking for all kinds of, any way and other ways that we can do stuff, right? So, small business, OTAs, prize challenges, anything that we've got going on with other service partners as well. We're looking to leverage all of those. So, and in those areas that you can see there, the different MITSM domains, all the sectors of manpower management that come into play. All right, and with that is all I have, and I think we're going to open the floor up for questions. I think we've got how much time we got?
I think we've got about 15
18 minutes or so for questions.
Thank you. Microphones over here if anyone has any questions for us. Oh, probably need to turn it on.
That's a good idea. Check.
Perfect.
Matt Figge, Worldscape Technologies. Of all the briefings I've been to this entire conference, yours resonated with me the most with what we have to offer. How does a small business get 60 minutes of your time to show you a platform that you've been looking for?
So take down that OMB. Send us an email. Reach out to us. We'll get it to the right folks. And we'll make contact.
Okay, maybe a few minutes of your time afterward.
Yeah, no worries.
Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for your time today.